Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the plenary panel for this year's 2026 Acquisition Research Symposium from the Naval Postgraduate School. We are with you virtually this year, but I want to thank the team at Monterey that has enabled this, and we have an incredible crowd of registrants, over 1,700 people from across all different parts of the defense and government contracting system. To kick us off with it, we had Mr. Jason Potter with our keynote address, and now we're following with a plenary panel. And the title of our panel is Accelerating Warfighting Capabilities, Putting the Industrial Base on a Wartime Footing. And for this discussion, we're honored to have an incredible panel starting with the Honorable Michael Cadenazzi, the Assistant Secretary of War for Industrial Base Policy, who'll be joining us shortly. Following his remarks, we will have Mr. James Ruocco, who is performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of War for Acquisition. And then Vice Admiral Dion English, who is the Director of Logistics, the J4 on the Joint Staff. So direct report to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. And then Mr. Mike Miller, who is the Director for the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, is in charge with all our foreign military sales and security cooperation efforts. So we're each of these panelists is going to have an opportunity for some opening remarks shortly. But to help us set the framework and set the context, prepared a couple slides that talk about what does it mean to be on a wartime footing, and look at each of the domains of our four panelists, and give a few opening thoughts and a little data to help start the conversation. So let's go ahead and start with the and if you want, for those in the audience, the bios for each of the speakers is on the website for the conference. And then also at any time you feel free to submit a question in the Q&A function, which is up on the top left or top middle of your Teams bar, and then we'll get those queued up for the Q&A session. So could you please bring up my presentation? All right. So accelerating warfighting capabilities, putting the industrial base on a wartime footing. So next, and here's our panel. Next. So what does it mean to be on a wartime footing? This looks at U.S. defense spending since World War II, and the line is actual in total dollars in 2025 dollars. So you can see the upward progression and the spikes and valleys between different conflicts: Korea, Vietnam, Cold War, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then today's president's budget requests. And then if you look at the bars, you'll see that's the percentage of GDP, which is how much we're spending as a percent of our gross domestic product. And one of the interesting things, if you look at this over time, you'll see that up through the end of the Cold War, we were spending over 5% generally of defense on GDP. And so what we looked at this late last year and came up with we talked about being on a wartime economy or a wartime footing. When you're on a wartime footing, you're ready for conflict, but you also have regular economic trends going on. So if you see during the Cold War, Vietnam, and even kind of in the Iraq, Afghanistan period, we were spending at a level we were kind of on a wartime footing. And then if you look at World War II, that was really a wartime economy where you had rationing of goods, where all means of direct government control of means of production to a degree. So that is much more kind of all hands on deck. And then a peacetime economy is when we have defense as a priority, but it is just one of many kind of priorities. And that was kind of most of our post-Cold War era. So if you look at go to the next slide. If you see, this is with 2025 data from the Stockholm Institute for Peace Research, or SIPRI. Their newest data from 2025 was out last week, so this is updated. And we looked at 9 countries. We looked at the U.S., some allies, and a couple adversaries. And what you see on here is that the yellow line is Ukraine, and you clearly are at a wartime economy where they're spending almost 40% of GDP on defense. And then ticking down, you see the purple line being Israel, the red line being Russia. They are definitely on a wartime footing, given the conflict in Ukraine that Russia started, and then obviously with Gaza and the Middle East for Israel. With Russia data, Russia doesn't, there's a lot of kind of commercial, the number is probably skewed quite a bit higher than listed, and Cypriot acknowledges that. And next down, you see the green line, which is Poland, which has more than doubled defense spending in the last decade and is up over almost 4.5%. And then U.S., UK, and Australia have been pretty steady. This does not include if the president's budget request becomes law, the U.S. will be spending 4.5%, which would be up to where Poland is, but that has not been appropriated yet. But you'll see that spending. And then the second to last line is China, which the data there is just, not correct. And Cypriot acknowledges they are spending a lot more on defense, but with civil military fusion, it's hard to kind of their reporting is not transparent. And then the final line is Japan. And what you see there is they went from a very modest self-defense force to they have dramatically increased on a relative share their defense spending. So next. Now here's I want to do one or two slides for each of our presenters. In the industrial base area, there's been the yellow line looks at new entrants in the defense industrial base. And there has been a decline since the end of the Afghanistan and Iraq involvement in new entrants. And that's been despite a lot of efforts by DoD to gain new entrants. The good news is that has actually begun to turn around the last couple years. 2025 data is not complete yet, so we weren't able to put that in, but you can see the positive trend there. And then we've done some separate analysis that a lot of the decline is not as steep as portrayed, because a lot of the new entrants are still pursuing new business, or they become subcontractors, so they're still in industrial base. And then if you look at the obligations, the dark blue are non-traditional new entrants, and you see the steady increase in the past decade on those obligations. So next. So turning to the acquisition world for Mr. Ruocco, there's everyone's becoming munitions expert in the last month or so, as Mr. Ruocco has kind of learned, I'm sure. But you see the dramatic increase in munitions and missile activity, probably almost 400% in obligations in the past several years. The blue being missiles, the yellow being bombs, and the green being ammunition. Interesting, ammunition is spiked a bit, and that's the 155 production in support of Ukraine. And then if you look at the categories on the right-hand side, you see the vast majority of the spend is on missiles, guided missiles, interceptors, and the like, which gets us to the next slide. Here, the consumption in Iran has been significant. This is draws on some work of my colleagues that looked at the both interceptors as well as munitions. And you see there has been a substantial usage of those systems, but there's still quite a bit left, particularly in on the munitions side, because we used them early in the war, but since the first few days, we've been able to use less expensive munitions. On interceptors, we have used quite a bit. And this is not a new trend. And that's why, which we'll talk about in the next slide, why the investments are happening. But the key is that we've got enough on hand for immediate. But the question is, how do we make sure we have enough for the contingencies? So next. Which gets us to, on the right-hand side, there's been a tremendous activity where Mr. Cadenazzi and Ruocco and I imagine Vice Admiral English has been involved in this as well, in terms of these framework agreements on a lot of the missions in the previous slide. Those were in train for a number of months and were signed actually mostly before operation Epic Fury, and they're going to essentially, triple production of Patriots and a lot of other things. And you see that in the president's budget submission, particularly the mandatory reconciliation submission to get after those investments. And the other thing is you've seen as tremendous investments across the industrial base in areas like critical minerals. Here we're talking about Project Vault for critical minerals reserve, as well as kind of previous investments with MP materials for rare earths. And there's lots of use of industrial-based tools. So next. Now turning to the logistics world, to Vice Admiral English, resilient logistics backbone and manufacturing search capacity are core requirements for credible deterrence. The battle for contested logistics is real, and that's why they've a lot of tremendous number of exercises and experiments in the Pacific in terms of with our allies and partners, and how do we pre-position equipment, protect supply and communication lines, sustain forces overseas. And that's a big focus with AUKUS, for instance, and the regional sustainment framework that Vice Admiral English is heavily involved in. And then how do we build manufacturing security for resilient supply and robust deterrence for munitions and other things? And this is where a shameless plug, where we're helping Vice Admiral English with some work there on what we call manufacturing security program, which he'll get into. And the idea is, how do we build on existing authorities and efforts to really kind of surge manufacturing capacity? What are the best practices and lessons learned to do that? And Congress has helped with the establishment of the Civil Reserve Manufacturing Network, which Honorable Cadenazzi has responsibility for implementing on his team. And that is, again, trying to get some commercial capacity to help with manufacturing surge capacity. So next slide. And then the final slide here. This is for Mr. Miller. He's responsible for military sales, and if you look at the tremendous spike in FMS obligations over the past 15 years, there's been robust security cooperation with the U.S. and our allies. And as you can see, most of the spend is in platforms and munitions. So that is the F-35, F-16 variants, F-15 variants, the ground vehicles, and a small amount of ships, and then munitions. Ranging from AMRAAM to JDAMs to all kinds of other munitions going to our close Patriot. THAAD going to our close allies and partners. So where does security cooperation go in the future? So next slide, please. So let's kind of, now we're going to turn to our panelists in order. We're going to go with Admiral Cadenazzi and then Mr. Ruocco, and get their perspectives. And then again, go ahead and get your questions submitted in the Q&A chat. We'll get those ready to go. So, but over to you, Honorable Cadenazzi. Great to see you. I'm glad you could join.
Hey, Jared, thank you very much. And thanks to everybody, the team here for joining today. I really appreciate it. Distinguished guests, faculty, students, and friends, and an honor to be back with the Naval Postgraduate School community, school I graduated from in 2000, proudly, after a lot of work. I remember it. In the Arsenal of Freedom Tour, Secretary Hegseth has called for a revival of the partnership in the industrial base, from the factory to the foxhole. I talk a lot about the wizards behind the warriors, the industry folks, the workers, the engineers, the scientists that actually make all the gear that allows our warfighters to go do what they need to do. I'm honored to be responsible for guiding the department's efforts to revitalize and sustain the DIB to meet our and our allies' needs. To kind of explain what IBP does, it's kind of interesting. If you remember during COVID, there are these sort of dystopian WEF commercials around, you will own nothing and you will be happy. It was this sort of vision of a future where you don't have any property possessions, you don't run the things, you rent, you borrow, whatever. But I thought about it, and that's actually what the industrial-based policy does. We don't own anything. We don't deploy capabilities. We don't deploy troops. We don't repair things. We don't buy things. We actually have the privilege to go ahead and help everyone solve their problems. And so we get to go out to industry, to programs, to our partners in the organic industrial base, to work with universities to help solve problems at every level. It's a fantastic model, and I'm thrilled to be providing value at so many different places at so many different times across the department's requirements in the industrial base. I'm also performing the duties of the Assistant Secretary of War for International Armaments Cooperation. So I get to manage the transition of the Defense Security Cooperation Agency, where Director Miller is, and the Defense Technology Security Administration, and their migration into the acquisition and sustainment team. So I get to go ahead and mess around with domestic weapon sales and international weapon sales as well. It's quite fun. So there's a real urgency at the moment as we've seen erosion of the defense industrial base over the past 30 years. So in my confirmation process, there were two very clear messages that the Senate provided to me, the SAS provided to me. The first was how incredibly supportive they were and are of the defense industrial base and addressing the challenges therein. That's great, and it was very bipartisan and really reflective of the spirit of concern about where things are. The second question that they had for their expressed concern was, why are things so messed up? And I think it's a fair question because they've offered a lot of money, they've offered an incredible array of authorities, and we're not seeing improved performance yet. And so I think it's incumbent upon all of us to take a hard look at where we are relative to those problems. In fact, in my last testimony, Senator Wicker, the chairman of the SASC, said, I've been here for a while. Am I responsible for this? Is this Congress responsible for why things are bad? And I think the hard answer is yes, but it's not certainly Senator Wicker. It's all of us. This is a problem that has been bipartisan. It's been multi-administration. It's taken a long time to get here. The important part is that we're taking an honest look at where the div is and that we're being realistic in our assessments of the resources and the requirements to fix it over time. Just read the GAO reports, and if you don't, you should. We spent billions. Things have not necessarily gotten better over time. In fact, in some places, despite the money we've spent, things have gotten worse. And so I'll give you a couple examples. No Army vehicles met readiness targets in 2024. Despite a near doubling of the shipbuilding budget, ship size is not measurably, fleet size is not measurably increased. And in fact, our readiness problems have worsened in many ways. F-35 deliveries were late, an average of 238 days. There's a whole long litany of problems I could go into in the industrial base and our performance and delivery. And for you Taylor Swift fans out there, I'm in my crushing morosity era when I talk about all the problems here. It's pretty sobering at times. So the question is, how did we get here? We've all contributed. We've outsourced our manufacturing to our strategic competitors, as in things like rare earth elements, because it was dirty, it was toxic, it was hard. We forgot how to mine, refine, and process these capabilities. And in the process, we've lost 2 generations of scientists and engineers who would help us build the new technologies and tools to do it better, faster, and cleaner, which is what ultimately is the unlock for these capabilities. So as of now, we're 95% dependent upon outside sources for our rare earth elements. And if we left that to the market and to forces for themselves, we'd probably be 96 or 97% dependent tomorrow. That's why the department and the interagency under the president's leadership has made the commitment that we should go through and spend time and effort working these very difficult, fundamental industrial problems because they are key to our success for the future. We've tried in the past to reform the department. There's been many initiatives for acquisition improvement. They've failed not for lack of effort and not for good intent, is because we've optimized the system for peacetime production. So exclusively focused on low volume, high complexity systems that are exquisite. We've done that with burdensome regulatory regimes that don't incentivize innovation. We've done that in a way where we've counted upon the companies to operate and deliver these tools without a lot of scrutiny at the lower levels of the supply chain to understand what the impacts were. These were problems that were well known, but they've led to the steady deterioration of the industrial base and our own performance relative to our adversaries. China now dominates global manufacturing with nearly 30% of global output, surpassing the United States at 17%. With as much as 200 times greater shipbuilding capacity, China can scale defense production in a way that offers alternatives for them that we don't have. We have more than somewhere between 200 and 400,000 defense manufacturing jobs currently open, and we have an expected 2.5 million manufacturing jobs we expect to be open over the next 10 years. We've reached this point because we made a lot of rosy assumptions about how history would unfold after the end of the Cold War. The end of history sort of framing that America would be a hyperpower forever. We made some decisions that have put us in a structural deficit as a result. That means we need radically different approaches now to generate radically different outcomes for the future. That is reflected in the real bias for action you're seeing in the department and the effort we're putting into things at all levels. So I have a fantastic job in the Pentagon. I love it. It's truly Industrial base is at the center of everything we're talking about. It's at the heart of the national security strategy from the White House. It's the fourth pillar of the national defense strategy that was released from the Secretary. I'm really excited to be running 3 different teams that drive these capabilities. The first team is our industrial base growth team, which was previously the Office of Small Business Programs, which we renamed because I think the small business angle is important. It's a critical and successful element that we contribute to, but it only captures a part of what we want, which is new entrants, right? New companies that of any size that want to come serve the department. And we've had a long history of not bringing in the right companies from the past. We spent a long time trying to bring Silicon Valley, private equity, venture capital-backed companies into the department in the 2010s. Just up the road from NPS, I remember being interested in all those companies back in the late 90s. And a lot of them have grown into the companies that you're seeing today dominate the market. We wanted them to participate, and for a long time, they didn't want to play. They've all turned up in force. They've arrived with companies, with capital, with products, and an incredible workforce that wants to contribute to national security. So we want to enter and involve them in national security business. We want to consider them a part of the industrial base, and we want to take action to make sure that we're making it easier for them to come invest and join us. We're also investing in programs like the Mentor Protege program, which ties mature defense companies with smaller defense companies want to tie in, and 90 plus Apex accelerators operating in 300 plus locations that are responsible for providing critical sort of doorway opening activities for companies that want to join the DIB. And we formalized that into our Link software platform, which is a suite of tools intended to help small businesses and new entrants to understand how to go ahead and do business with the Department of War. You can check it out at linksconnect.io if you want. If you haven't signed up, please do. It's really important. The second team is our industrial base resilience team. This is where we have our Defense Production Act Title III and industrial base funds, where we go ahead and invest directly into the defense industrial base to solve problems. Last year, we spent over $2 billion. We've already invested over $2.5 billion this fiscal year into things like minerals, batteries, workforce initiatives, critical mechanical issues. It's a fantastic tool for us to go ahead and make improvements and work with our program and company partners to make sure we're tracking on their needs for the future. The third team is our global investments and economic security team, which focus on the safeguards for our economic development. So in the DIB, we believe in strong economy as the bedrock of a strong defense. So we published the annual 1260H list of Chinese military companies operating in the U.S., providing critical insight into the threat of adversarial capital underway within the lower tiers of the supply chain. We're working to implement Section 805 of the FY 2024 NDAA, which provides critical tools for assessing the locations for threat companies that are operating at the lower tiers of the supply chain. And we also help secure our supply chain by looking at key domestic M&A trends, as well as the Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S., which look at the threat of adversary transactions or potentially threatening transactions in the supply chain. So really fantastic stuff and a lot of cool things that we get to do and touch every day. With the DIB Center of the National Security Efforts, the White House is also focused on foreign military sales and direct commercial sales. So in standing up the new Secretariat for International Armaments Cooperation, we're engaged in a significant reform effort to go ahead and accelerate what we're going to do. Director Miller is going to talk about that, I'm sure. So within IAC, we have 3 lines of effort as well to include strategic partnerships, our own strategy initiatives, and agreements with our partners. That includes direct engagement with DISCA and DITSA and our operations and how they can streamline and be better positioned for the future. This will ensure that the industrial base remains a pillar, not only the arsenal of freedom remains a pillar, not just of domestic industrial capability, but also for our allies and partners as well. So we're going to leverage foreign investment to help close gaps in the industrial base here. We're going to go ahead and increase the lethality and survivability of the joint force by working cooperative capability development, that is co-production efforts, and the things that we're doing with our partners as well. And we're going to allow and encourage our allies to take greater responsibility for the developments of their own domestic industrial base. We're working diligently to implement our 2 EOs, EO 14268, reforming foreign defense sales to improve speed and accountability, and EO 14383, establishing an America First arms transfer strategy. These EOs are critical and they're clear, and their mandate to transform our approach to defense sales, specifically to increase U.S. operational and industrial readiness while improving outcomes for allies and partners. Our goal is to improve the speed of delivery on these defense sales, also helping us to build out the DIB. And our one DIB supplies both for the U.S. and for our allies and partners in almost every case. So it's critical we look at the resilience of our own production capabilities, as that's the bedrock of our sales and our commitment to our partners overseas. The last year, Secretary Hegseth announced in November the launch of the first ever acquisition transformation strategy, representing a significant leap forward in our approach to driving change. The ATS is at the center of these efforts for driving improvement in the DIB. We're running Rebuild the DIB, which is one of the lines of effort listed under there. And it lists supercharging the DIB within the National Defense Strategy as one of the key tenets that we need to pursue going forward. We need to do that a couple different ways. We need to stabilize demand, working with the Congress and the administration on larger, longer contracts. We're seeing those in the investments we've made into solid rocket motors and munitions. We're seeing that in the contracts we're put out, the discussions we're having. That top-down demand stability is critical and reflects one of the particular needs that industry has said they require to invest further and to accelerate. We're meeting that challenge, and we're doing it in partnership with our folks, our friends on the Hill, to make sure that this is an enduring change and one that's going to be a critical unlock for the future. We need to go ahead and accelerate. We need to accept more acquisition risk to decrease operational risk. It's a critical element of this is the right risk balance for the future. We've indexed more towards the safe side of that. We've indexed more towards oversight. We need to go ahead and balance that forward to increase the volume and speed of production for the future. I have the honor to go ahead and travel to DIB sites all over the country to learn what's going on. In California, talking with new suppliers, space new entrants, advanced manufacturing firms that are using AI, they're using additive manufacturing to accelerate their ability to meet our requirements. It's a fascinating set of tools that we need to bring to bear, not just in the new players, but also to bring to bear on the legacy programs where we have problems producing, where we have sustainment issues. I've been to Hawaii twice, luckily. Honolulu Community College hosts their advanced manufacturing training suite, where we're running the first manufacturing training commitment curriculum that's been on the island for almost 50 years. We help to fund that. We're also funding a capability at the Forge, which is at Schofield Barracks in partnership with the 25th ID, to go ahead and use 3D printing, advanced manufacturing tools, forges, all containerized systems to go ahead and deploy those capabilities for the future. We actually have all of our tools containerized and deployed with the 25th ID in the Philippines right now to learn operational lessons for how to better support the deployed force in an austere environment, to go ahead and make sure that they have the ability organically to produce what they need at or near the front lines where the fight is, to meet their requirements in challenging conditions. There's already completed 36 jobs over 3 weeks at Balakatan 2026, saving $23,000 in parts costs and a lot of travel time to go to make sure that capability is there. We've learned a ton of lessons about how we continue to invest in those capabilities for the future. We've a very long way to go, but it's a strong start, and I'm thrilled to be working at the front edge of this initiative for the future. So what does all this mean? For me, again, I talk often about radical outcomes because we do need to go ahead and approach things very differently. I'm excited to be a part of the team that's willing to go ahead and do that. As Secretary Hegseth has said, a modernization of the Department of War and the industrial base is critical. We know that reforming our defense sales system is critical. We know that bringing new capabilities and authorities to bear is critical as well. It's a huge challenge, and it's one we have to meet. We can't go back to where we were. We've got to continue to press forward with the lessons learned and the changes we've made up front. We've got to embed those in the rules for how we operate. We've got to change the culture for how we operate, the way we think about these things, from the contracting officer to the engineer to the skilled labor that's at the front lines of the factories where we're working every day. So 2 requests. Number 1, help us spread the message, spread the urgency of the moment, the need for change, and then come to us with your best ideas. Reach out to IBP, talk to your program managers. If we don't get it, if we're not doing the right stuff, if we're missing opportunities for change, I need to hear about it as soon as possible so we can work with our partners in the building and on the Hill to make sure we're positioning the industry for success in the future. I want to be active partners in this with you, and I look forward to meeting and talking to many of you in the future. Thanks. Over to you, Jerry.
All right, thanks a lot, Mike. Thanks in particular for having two roles, wearing two hats. So I'm two very, very important missions in acquisition and sustainment. So thanks very much. Now over to Mr. Ruocco. Jim, great to have you with us and talk to us about how you're addressing the munitions and other kind of acquisition issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Good morning. Thank you for hosting at NPS. Appreciate that. And it's a real privilege to join this panel alongside three outstanding leaders. Admiral Cadenazzi, who's charged with revitalizing and expanding the industrial base. Admiral English, that's figuring out how to fight the fight in a contested environment to make sure that the logistic support is there where we need it. And Mr. Miller, who's changing the shape of how we do business with our international partners to make sure that we're interoperable and they're equipped with what they need to fight the fight with us. Together, our portfolios represent the full life cycle of everything across the system that makes warfighting readiness possible. It's the ecosystem of warfighting advantage. Let me talk a little bit about the strategic context, and Admiral Cadenazzi did a great job of talking about kind of where we've been and what we're doing next. We're operating, really, from my view, in the most consequential security environment in a generation. Our competitors are accelerating. The strategic environment is fluid, and the margins for bureaucratic delay have collapsed. In fact, we're recovering from 30 years of atrophy. The acquisition perspective that I bring to it is speed is now a warfighting requirement, and we're putting the whole system on a wartime footing, which means every delay is a decision that we can't afford. So the department's acquisition transformation strategy is our operational response to this reality. It's not an incremental reform. It's not an academic exercise or a bureaucratic one. It's a fundamental re-architecture of how we develop, produce, deliver, and sustain capability. It serves as a once-in-a-generation overhaul of the entire system, spanning all aspects from the shape and scale of our industrial base to how we interact with it, to our regulatory reforms and a framework, from our acquisition and sustainment planning to the execution of our resourcing processes, and from our technical processes and systems to our workforce. People often ask me what's different this time around. I've been through several rounds of reform. Others probably have as well. I would say there's a growing sense that we must act with wartime urgency, and we have the leadership that's aligned and willing to challenge everything. We're overhauling acquisition, requirements, and resourcing together, so we have a complete system approach to this. And if we fail, our warfighters and our nation's security is at risk. The good news is we're seeing a lot of alignment, not just in the department here, but across the administration, the Congress, and industry to get after the transformation objectives. A lot to unpack here in the ATS. I can't go into all of that, but I suggest you read it if you haven't already. There's a lot of familiar features in there. There's also some new ones that I think will be truly game-changing. 38 initiatives organized in 5 pillars, and it's all about building an acquisition system that's designed for the fight today. There's a couple of overarching imperatives here. We want to deliver capability faster by reducing bureaucracy and empowering decision makers. We want to increase volume through multi-year procurements, shared investment, and portfolio level execution. And we want to expand competition by lowering barriers to entry and embracing more commercial innovation and industry-driven solutions. Some of the key enablers of the acquisition transformation strategy, I'll talk about a little bit about the institutionalization of capability portfolio management. That's assessing our acquisition requirements and investment decisions in a mission context to solve operational problems and close warfighting gaps. We're also going to establish portfolio acquisition executives, and in fact, we're pretty far down that road already. These are leaders empowered to make decisions at the mission level, not program by program. PAs allow us to manage them by mission, align resources and requirements, and make trades at the speed of relevance, not the speed of bureaucracy. Some of what we're getting after that's truly different in the acquisition transformation strategy is more steady and predictable demand signals that allow industry to share risk and get to the scale we need with the commitment of resources and shared risk along the way. We have multi-year procurements underway right now that give industry the confidence to invest in their workforce, in tooling, facilities, other infrastructure. Again, back to that shared skin in the game. And it also helps us level the playing field between the traditional defense industrial base as well as the new entrants that we want to encourage more of. Some real world examples that we're already moving down the tracks at a pretty high pace. We talked a bit about munitions on the front end of this, and I will tell you, I've always been a zealot in the munitions and weapons area. A war always helped us get a little bit more energy on that, but we're now pursuing really a two-pronged objective of filling all of our total munitions requirements gaps, which have been gaps for years, at a much higher pace, and at the same time implementing a lot of the acquisition transformation strategy initiatives to prove how we can actually do business differently. And I think we're already seeing the benefits with industry making investments, and we're bending some of the curves on procurement profiles. The intent is to expand this approach even beyond munitions and start looking at other programs where we can apply the same approach using multi-year commitments, commitment of resources, and then shared investment and risk from industry. And we're also bringing experienced operators and teams in to help those companies get up on step, help our own acquisition workforce, negotiating better deals. And so we're seeing the tangible benefits of that already, and I expect that to accelerate in the coming years. Some of the key enablers to maximizing flexibility is going to be removing the barriers that are slowing us down. We're executing the most significant and ambitious overhaul of the FAR and DFARs in history, reducing them back to their statutory roots. There are more than 3,000 mandates and 500 pages that have already been removed. This is not a regulatory housekeeping exercise. It's a structural modernization that will shift the system from compliance to delivery, prioritize commercial solutions, and remove government unique burdens that keep companies out of the defense market. We're modernizing how we apply cost and pricing rules and transitioning toward AI-enabled tools that help the workforce write contracts faster and more accurately. And it goes beyond just FAR and DFAR regulations to certification and qualification processes and how we do test as well. All of this will help us remove drag so that speed becomes a weapon. Regarding technical processes, if we want to be successful and outpace our adversaries, we're going to have to design, build, and deliver capability at the pace of the threat. That means shorter decision cycles, incremental delivery, empowering teams, and risk management, not risk avoidance. There's a few areas that are central to this, not necessarily new ideas, but rethinking how we get after these in a different way. The software acquisition pathway is central to enabling continuous development, DevSecOps, automated testing, and putting the warfighter in the loop. We'll continue to scale and smartly apply this pathway. We already have software cadres out helping teams implement how to get after the imperatives around the software acquisition pathway. Similarly, the MOSA, Modular Open Systems approach, is something we've been struggling to get after for a while. Expanding the number of competitors in the space is going to help us do that. We'll also deploy MOSA cadres to help get after the architecture of adaptability. Open system architectures that allow new sensors, effectors, and algorithms to plug into legacy platforms. And finally, modernizing system engineering has been on the plate for a while, getting after mission engineering, kill webs and kill chain analysis, and digital engineering so that we get after the fundamentals of capability portfolio management and move discovery to the left so we can deliver these systems faster. And I'd say most foundational part of all of this acquisition transformation is empowering the workforce and getting the right folks up on step in that workforce. We got to get that right. Can't overstate it enough. And I hope to speak more about that in the Q&A. None of this transformation is going to be possible without that acquisition workforce. They're the ones who turn strategy into capability. They are the system, and our job is to empower them with the authorities, tools, and culture needed to operate with the urgency using informed risk. And on that note, we're moving from a more compliance-based system to a risk-based, risk-informed set of decisions that speed over perfection, initiative over caution, and action over inaction. Our people are the decisive advantage. We're moving together. We give the warfighter what no adversary can match, the full power of the American nation. So I'll close by saying this transformation strategy isn't about processes, it's about outcomes. It's about delivering capability faster, designing and delivering the systems that can evolve at speed, and giving our workforce the authority and tools to act with urgency. We have multi-year procurements, PAEs, MOSA, software pathways. These aren't abstract reforms. They're about how we out-innovate and outproduce our adversaries. And the leaders who will carry out this transformation forward are right here at MPS. You sit at the intersection of operators, technology, and innovation. If we move with urgency and purpose, we'll give the warfighter something that the competitor cannot match: the full power of the American innovation, American industry, and the talent developed here. That's how we're going to deter. That's how we're going to prevail. Thank you, and I look forward to our conversation. Back to you, Jerry.
All right, thank you very much, Jim. As both Admiral Cadenazzi and Mr. Ruocco outlined, the strategy is the key, and that is what is driving their action. So I encourage you to look at that if you have not. And one of the underappreciated things of this effort, which will help it builds off previous efforts, but one of the things they've got is more time. You know, they did it in year 1 as opposed to year 3 of an administration. So you got 3 solid years, and you can see the pace they're moving. So let's move to the next area, which is Vice Admiral English, who's fond to say that logistics is actual combat power. So, and he's lived that dream throughout his career, and has done tremendous work. So, Vice Admiral English, over to you, sir.
Hey, Jerry, thank you. And thank you for the opportunity to be here today with this panel of distinguished leaders that we have across our department. You know, you will quickly notice and look and see that one of these things are not like the other, and it's me sitting here in a uniform. But I would make the argument continually through this morning that all of us are warfighters. All of us are doing things to support people on the pointy end of the spear. And so the work, the collective thought and actions that we have among this group is what's going to be necessary to keep us as the strongest nation that we have out there. It's really good to be here virtually. And I say that because when we first got the opportunity, I thought that we were all coming to Monterey. But instead, we get to do it in a manner that allows us to continue to be surrounded by strategic minds, acquisition professionals, and industry leaders who actually build the foundation of our national defense. We know and we understand, we've said it, we haven't recognized a common theme among the comments so far. What we used to do was good for a point, but it's not good enough now. So for a generation, we enjoyed the luxury of operating with uncontested supply lines and absolute domain dominance in the things that we did. And under those conditions, we optimized the Department of War industrial base for peacetime efficiency. We built a system that was heavily reliant upon just-in-time delivery, lean inventories at the lowest possible cost. It was brilliant for business, but what it did was it created a brittle architecture for warfighting. And as we talked about earlier, that era is over. When facing a peer adversary in a highly contested environment, optimizing solely for efficiency is not in our best interest. It's actually a strategic vulnerability. So we frequently obsess over the tooth of our military, the speed of our hypersonic weapons, the stealth of our platforms, the lethality of our munitions. And logistics is often referred to or relegated to designation as the tail. And so this morning, I'm here to tell you that in the current strategic landscape, that calculus is seriously flawed. Logistics is the very foundation of deterrence. And logistics is warfighting. It is a warfighting function, just like C2, fires, and maneuver. Our deterrence hinges on convincing the adversary that the cost of a conflict will overwhelmingly outweigh any perceived benefits that they have. An adversary might calculate that they can absorb our initial forward deployed combat power. What shatters their calculus is the undeniable reality that the United States possesses an industrial depth to take a hit. Not only take that hit, but to rapidly replace those losses, to rapidly repair battle damage at the tactical edge, and to sustain high intensity operations indefinitely. Conversely, if our industrial base is brittle and it takes months to replace critical munitions, or we cannot repair our own platforms because we lack data rights, our combat power is fleeting. And a brittle force invites aggression. And so I can put it in more simple terms. I frequently tell a story about Mike Tyson. And it's really simple. Just suppose we were in school and Mike Tyson was the bully in our high school. And if he met you in the hallway one day and said, hey, I want you to meet me out in the parking lot at 1500, I'm going to kick your butt. I don't know, 1500 seems like it's the international time of butt kicking in movies and on TV shows, but just, y'all bear with me for a moment. If you knew that Mike Tyson only had one punch to throw at you, you may be a little bit more willing to take him on. But if you knew he had everything in his arsenal, all the punches, all the moves, you probably would find anywhere else to be on God's green earth than in that parking lot at 1500. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about our industrial base and the need for it to continue to be strong. So to prevent conflict, we must visibly put our industrial base on a wartime footing. We must pivot our mindset from peacetime efficiency to wartime resiliency. And as Honorable Cadenazzi talked about earlier, we have to prioritize volume, velocity, and survivability. And so it means that we have to take advantage of the things that we already have. It means treating latent industrial capability and warm production lines as systems, as weapon systems in their own right. This transformation cannot happen solely on the battlefield. It must be engineered in places like right here. It must be engineered in the acquisition table. It must be engineered on the factory floor long before the first shot is fired. This imperative is the driving force behind the department's newest initiatives like acquisition reform that we heard earlier and munitions production acceleration. Concepts like the manufacturing security program can establish the critical contracting vehicles and partnerships right now so that we are not exchanging business cards, so that we're not making these relationships in the middle of a crisis. So furthermore, the civilian reserve manufacturing network, the CREMN, is actually operationalizing our nation's latent commercial capacity. It is identifying and preparing commercial partners to rapidly pivot their production lines to defense manufacturing. And we're building a surge capability that we could never afford on our own. It is literally the 21st century arsenal of freedom in action. It is galvanizing and mobilizing our nation. It is bringing us to a whole of nation solution and approach to what we're doing. So our ability to prevail demands that we write contracts today with sustainment up front. It demands that we secure the intellectual property needed for forward repair. It demands that we use public and private capital to scale our production. And it demands that government and industry and our international allies operate as one seamless logistics enterprise. So the people in this room, the people on this panel, the acquisition professionals, the strategic thinkers, and industry leaders that we have, we hold the pen to our future endurance. So as our other panel members, I too look forward to our discussion and how we forge this unbreakable chain together. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Admiral English, for your very inspiring remarks and bringing sustainment to the kind of how it impacts the warfighter and the industrial base. And now, to your last point around our allies and partners, now we turn to Mr. Miller, Director of DSCA, to talk to us about the Foreign Military Sales Enterprise, which is also heavily involved in the acquisition efforts and has now actually become a part of the new Assistant Secretary of War for International Armaments Cooperation as part of Acquisition World. So you are now not a policy wonk, but you are now an acquisition professional, Mike. So tell us what you're up to and where you're heading. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, Jerry. Thanks very much. Good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to join you today as part of such a great panel. Thanks, Jerry, again for the kind introduction and my sort of new role here as an acquisition official and calling it out. I appreciate it. Thanks to NPS also for the invitation today. My only regret in addressing you all is the challenge of trying to successfully follow the remarks of such a great set of leaders who spoke before me. But I will give it a shot. I'll also try to keep my remarks relatively brief because I think I am standing between these remarks and some Q&A. So let me start by stating the obvious. Today we face a host of strategic and economic threats which underscore the need for deterrence and cooperation with our allies and partners. And despite the strength and innovation, excellence of our American defense industrial base, the reality is, as has been described eloquently here, it is stretched and is struggling to move at the speed and scale required. That said, this administration has taken a hard look at how we do business, and since taking office, President Trump has directed the most significant overhaul of our acquisition system and arms transfer enterprise decades. I'll speak on this a bit more in detail, but to stress at the outset, through impactful executive orders, the president has directed us to improve speed and accountability, prioritize the U.S. warfighter, and establish an America First arms transfer strategy. And to be clear, America First does not mean America alone. Rather, is a call for a more serious, reciprocal set of partnerships where we all take ownership of the security that we share. We value our alliances and partnerships, and pursuant to our national strategic documents, foreign defense sales will strengthen both our partners and America's manufacturing base, and in turn, support the U.S. Joint Force. I must also note that foreign defense sales have been robust under this administration, and we expect that to continue. And Dr. McGinn, that was certainly evident in the chart you displayed at the start of this panel discussion. To summarize, we reached just over $100 billion in our 3-year rolling average for foreign military sales. The value of our direct commercial sales licensed by the Department of State has never been higher, and the United States now accounts for roughly 43% of the worldwide arms sales market, the closest competitor coming in at just under 10%. The challenge for my professional community is how to deliver on that foreign partner demand. Because, as Secretary Hegseth said in his November 7th Arsenal of Freedom speech at the National War College, quote, when we promise to supply our allies and partners with critical capabilities, we must deliver every time. As Honorable Cadenazzi said in his remarks today, we are working diligently with interagency partners to implement 2 key executive orders. The first, Executive Order 14268, reforming foreign defense sales to improve speed and accountability, and the second, Executive Order 14383, establishing the America First arms transfer strategy. The America First arms transfer strategy will help ensure that American industrial base remains the arsenal of freedom for the United States and all our partners and allies, and focuses on 3 key pillars. The first, reindustrializing America through arms transfers. Second, putting America first in arms transfers. And third, accelerating sales of American manufactured equipment. And in their sum, these executive orders direct us to transform our approach to foreign defense sales to build U.S. operational and industrial readiness while improving outcomes for allies and partners. I'll now provide some additional details of the actions we are taking pursuant to these executive orders. It's a bit of a list, but please rest assured that it is nowhere near an all-inclusive rundown. First thing I'd like to touch on are newly established metrics. We have worked hard with the FMS community to develop FMS case performance standards. These include clear timelines for establishing whether new efforts are actionable, and then how long new cases will take to develop and offer to partners, among other metrics already established and in development. And we will be posting our metric for developing new FMS work from request to offer on the DSCA website in the coming days, pursuant to a task in Executive Order 14268. We're also creating a single system to monitor FMS cases, a unified FMS tracking system, so we can track them from development to closure, ensure and then assess these cases against our performance metrics. This will provide transparency, predictability, and ensure leadership intervention to break through impediments to successful execution where needed. From the moment a case is opened to the day it closes, we want total transparency and predictability so that our practitioners or leadership can step in and clear roadblocks quickly, as I said. This work is ongoing, but we are making rapid progress this year. We also have made improvements and enhancements to our handling of non-program of records, or NPOR, as we call them. Last year, we established supplemental guidance in the Security Assistant Management Manual, or the SAM, to better align NPOR solutions with U.S. goals and partner requirements. This sets us up well as we consider how to best address the non-program of record requirements included in the fiscal year 26 National Defense Authorization Act. We've also refined the FMS only list, now called the government to government only list. We conducted a zero-based review and reduced the number of items available only via the FMS system from about 125 down to 86. And it's actually a much more narrow set of technologies and the details, ensuring that we are only withholding from direct commercial sales the most select and sensitive set of technologies. And there's a lot more to talk about, both directed via executive orders already issued and other actions in development based on direction of Department of War seniors and from the ground up, projects put forward based on the lived experience of our security cooperation professionals who are deeply committed to a reform agenda. At the risk of being slightly self-indulgent, allow me to describe one other change to the agency that matters greatly to me. Just in the past few months, we have successfully established the Defense Security Cooperation Service, or DSCS, which manages and supports about 1,500 personnel at 136 U.S. military groups at U.S. embassies around the world. DSCA now has full oversight and management of global military group staffing and training needs. And we will leverage our DSCS Mil Group colleagues to support the President's executive orders by ensuring the right people and resources are in place to advance U.S. national security priorities through our engagement abroad. Through transforming the way that these Mil Group personnel are organized, supported, and managed, DSCA is both bolstering a more capable, prepared, and empowered security cooperation embassy workforce. In short, these dedicated professionals now have a home in the Department of War they claim as their own, and also the dedicated support that they deserve. A more prepared and empowered security cooperation embassy workforce means better outcomes for its allies and partners. As I like to say, security cooperation efforts that start well typically end well. Having well-trained, well-supported colleagues downrange will help do just that. Just a quick note on realignment to acquisition sustainment as described. All of the great work I've described is supercharged by my agency's realignment, along with the Defense Technology Security Administration, or DTSA, to the Undersecretary of War for Acquisition and Sustainment this past February. And also as being part of the International Armaments Cooperation family, as Honorable Cadenazzi has already described it. Unifying the acquisition and defense sales life cycles ensures arms transfers effectively balance U.S. and foreign partner demand, are programmatically viable, and are also strategically sound, maintaining the credibility of U.S. defense commitments and our technological edge on the battlefield. We must not treat FMS as a somewhat separate, isolated process that is not tightly aligned to the department's acquisition efforts for the joint force. We are instead fusing it directly into the heart of our core acquisition enterprise. This creation of a unified enterprise to manage defense exports and international partnerships is absolutely vital. Oversight by a single senior official from initial planning and resource allocation through contract execution and production optimizes efficiency and responsiveness in arms transfers. And this will carry positive benefits for many years to come. And all of the foregoing, as flagged by my colleague, Ms. Ruocco today, is to drive better outcomes for the joint force, our industrial base, and our partners. They are not merely a set of initiatives or plans. These are tangible outcomes that we are going to drive towards and have. And so in conclusion, I just hope I was able to shed some light on foreign defense sales reform and the current state of security cooperation, whether it's consolidating demand, building resilience through partner capability, or reforming the system itself. My agency is not on the sidelines of this transformation to a wartime footing. We are in the middle of it. Thank you for your time and your attention. I look forward to continuing this conversation and hearing your insights.
Wow, great comments, Mike. Really appreciate that. We got a bunch of questions that come in, so I'm going to go ahead and group them so we can get right in the Q&A. One of the questions brought in kind of really sort of summarizes one of the themes I want to get to is, how do you think about managing the tension between steady demand signal and competition? So the whole idea of the demand signal, a lot of these big framework agreements that the department has signed, how are you going to get these on contract? And these are with existing providers. How are you going to do that at the same time where you want to have more competition in the industrial base? So talk a bit about kind of some of the efforts to not only get this demand signal, but help to maintain competition throughout the acquisition life cycle. So over to any of you all to answer that, to get into that topic.
Jim, why don't you take that one to start?
Okay, thank you. So I understand the question and why that's a tension point. And there's different ways to handle this. First of all, we already brought new entrants into the mix. Some of that was by lowering some barriers to entry. Some of that was because they were hungry. They had private equity investments. They were able to capitalize the things they needed to capitalize and bring solutions to the table. There is a demand signal there operationally for what we call total munitions requirements. We have a whole process to build that out, using munitions as an example. And so we haven't really figured out how to get all the low cost stuff in there. Getting the low cost and high end stuff, kind of low end, high end mix, low high mix that we call it, getting that dialed in. But we've set the conditions, even without all those requirements really figured out, to start bringing those folks in. And then even though we're making these framework deals with these companies with commitments of multi-year, and they make investments, et cetera, at the prime level into major subs, I will tell you the most of the thing I mentioned earlier, done right, and we're already starting to do this on some programs, we will keep that window open on competition over time by allowing not just an open architecture, but allowing multiple competitors to play to come on at sub level. So not necessarily the primes, but the subs that can play with bringing in a new sensor, a new control system, whatever it is, a new software capability, and allow them to play. So that gets us, even though we made a long-term commitment to that program at the system level, we're keeping competition open at the lower level to be able to on-ramp competitors and keep them all interested, because they know if they comply with that open architecture, they'll be able to play for that business going forward. Those are all things we're doing right now.
Great.
Jerry, if I could, weigh in on that. Fantastic answer, Jim. Thank you. I think also on the new entrants, we've established a non-program of record office within the International Armaments Cooperation Team. They mentioned that at DISC as well. Director Miller's making changes to allow that to be easier. There is an appetite for export of our, the non-traditional kind of platforms and products of those companies overseas to our allies and partners. That's going to be fantastic for competition. It's going to provide new avenues for them to get capital, for them to establish demand signals, even as we're still investing substantially in what you'd call legacy systems, and we're ramping up our purchases of these new capabilities. We see a whole bunch of additional demand that's going to be available from our partners and allies that's going to go ahead and unlock additional expansion and investment in their businesses. That's going to really accelerate things. And I think you're going to see a lot of that over the next 18 to 24 months, particularly as we stabilize some of the policies and processes that are going to underpin that for the future. And I think it's a great opportunity to see both sides of industry working hard to deliver our capabilities. So our primes, our traditional primes, and then the neo primes that are working forward to go ahead and make new capabilities for the future. So
great. I wonder if you could expand a little bit on that, any of you all. There's been also in the strategies the talk about improving producibility, and the Air Force has this family of affordable mass munitions that's kind of trying to build things faster, more build to print kind of activities. So how are those kind of efforts going? And then there's also a focus on multi-sourcing. There's how do you get more people building different stuff, either through co-production with allies and partners, or building subsystems and the like. So how is and that brings in lots of the industrial base. Anything you're seeing in those areas? Over.
So I'll take a crack. Oh, go ahead, Beverly English. You're mute.
Muted.
How about now? Can you hear me? All right. Yeah, I agree with the previous answers. One, I think when we talk about the inclusion of partners and allies, that's going to be key to that second part that you asked us, Jerry, to expanding that. Part of this job, I get to sit on the NATO Logistics Committee. And I was just there last week, and there's an incredible amount of conversation that goes around interoperability and standardization, not only of processes, but of the things that we use. So it makes it a little bit easier for production. So not only are they additional customer base, but they can also help us with the production of some of these things if we get the relationships right. The other piece that I wanted to mention was to continue to court the new entrants. You know, one of the things that we get to see sitting here in the Pentagon there, we're not short of folks who come in with good ideas, and some of those ideas actually make it through into being executed. And so, if we are able to court these folks and inspire a culture of innovation and allow them to participate in the process, I think that makes us a little bit healthier. And the last piece is to have serious engagement with our second and third tier producers, suppliers, and manufacturers. That piece, I think, is going to be key to expanding this and doing it in that area and getting rid of some of the friction that we talked about earlier.
Great stuff. Agree totally with Admiral English. I'll add in, we have substantial manufacturability challenges within the supply chain at every level. And this is a result of a whole bunch of forces underway within the department, the slow timeline, the cost for certification and qualification, the dependence and reliance upon a certain subset of the industrial base to provide capabilities. And so we're spending an incredible amount of time and effort as part of acquisition transformation and our focus on ramping up capacity to invest directly in the supply chain on these issues. So you've heard about the Business Operators for National Defense, which is an initiative directed by Deputy Secretary Feinberg, which is post-CEO life, very senior manufacturing experts from the private sector primarily, who are coming in and working on this issue with us. They're actually going to the floor of production units. They're talking to companies. They're walking in and talking to the engineers about how they can improve production and deal with challenges that have inhibited ramping up and scale in the past. And so we're concurrently investing a lot of money into those businesses and those manufacturing processes to unlock new and alternative approaches for things like additive, where you basically need a lot of data to go ahead and convince the engineers to go ahead and write off that it'll work. And so we're investing in those capabilities to make sure that as new technologies come forward and new processes and innovative ideas are proposed, we can actually take full advantage of them on a rapid timescale. It takes a lot of focus to do that. That's under Mr. Ruocco's team under acquisition is the ones driving a lot of those initiatives. We get to support them and actually see some of that to fruition over the next few years. You'll see a lot of unlocked potential and capability at the factory floor that we're really excited about.
Yeah, I agree with that, Jerry. I'd add just maybe a couple other things we haven't talked about yet. We are exploring the idea of having design houses. They could be new entrants. They could be the traditional defense industrial base. Those systems are a little more closed. I think the new entrants, there's a bigger opportunity to take what they're designing, prove that it works, and then take that to a manufacturing house, which could be non-traditional defense contractors. It could be the commercial industry like GM or Ford or J-Bill. It could be lots of different entities as long as we can work out licensing agreements, et cetera. So that's one thing we're talking about. And then another feature that we're evolving right now and maturing is this idea of marketplaces. Marketplaces are springing up all over the place, Amazon looking things. My idea of a marketplace is, yes, that, and it needs a way of having an experimentation element to it where we can present operational problems. Industry can come in and present what they believe the solutions look like to those problems. We allow them to demonstrate those, and based on the viability of those solutions in a warfighting context, we had to go to rapid contracts through other transaction authority. So basically using CSOs to pull them in, present operational problems, use OTAs to award contracts rapidly and quickly onboard capabilities. Now, there's all the .mil PF things that need to get worked out in that process, depending on what you're acquiring. But these are the type of features that we're talking about, how we would scale production and bring new entrants in quickly with solutions that we hadn't thought about before. And those are features inside of the acquisition transformation strategy now. including, to Admiral English's point, going wherever we need to go to in the supply chain. And we're already exhibiting that behavior. We're going wherever we need to go right now, whether it's broad things like the things Admiral Cadenazzi's team is working on our solid rocket motors, to very specific pinch points in the industrial base.
Great, great answers. Mike, I wonder if you could talk a bit about kind of co-production, and also I wanted to ask you about exportability. One of the features that's in the strategy and in the FMS or the tech transfer thing is like, how do we build exportability into systems at the front end? Because that's where you do it. Because because there's often an afterthought. It helps, with a program kind of extended with FMS, but bringing it, instead of rhetorically at the front of a program, but really bringing it through exportability efforts and the like. Can you talk a bit about that?
Dr. McGinn, it is a affliction across this community that there are a lot of mics. So I assume you're talking to me. So I'll start there.
That's true. That's true. Fair enough.
That's a fair point. Just on the last point, I didn't want to interrupt the better comments that were made. I just did want to give a shout out to our colleagues, Assistant Secretary Fogel and Hero Rodriguez, who heads the Advocacy Center over at Commerce. Just on the competition part, they're doing great work that requires some attention and how they're amending the way that we're doing defense advocacy. So to make sure we're competitive in international endeavors. So I just want to give them a shout out. You rightly note that exportability is something that was flagged in the president's first executive order. And that's something we're working at collectively with our ANS colleagues, and certainly Mr. Cadenazzi will have views on this, trying to make sure that we get additional resources and also processes in place to have accountability accounted for, exportability accounted for as early in the development process as possible. It is always a more expensive and time-consuming endeavor to prepare something for export later, which can lead to delay, frustration, and sometimes just candidly failure to deliver on promises we've made. So that was something that the community and our leadership felt very strongly needed to be looked at in a new way, a more aggressive way, because it really will pay outsized benefits for partners and allies. But with that, I'll just turn it over to Mr. Cadenazzi.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a variety of things happening. Look, there's so much opportunity to make this system better from a co-production standpoint for the future. I think one of the most exciting things is the demand from our allies and partners to be part of our ecosystem. We do this all the time, B2B. We don't necessarily formally call it co-production because there isn't some signing ceremony in a document with a secretary hanging around. But at the end of the day, we have incredible capability, and our businesses that serve us are always looking for best of breed capability from our allies and partners to make sure that they're not missing some opportunity for scale. And we need to go ahead and take further advantage of that. As Director Miller said early on, America first does not mean America alone or America only. In fact, it's quite the opposite. What we want to do is accelerate those business-to-business connections and ultimately drive additional weapon sales as part of our commitment to the capacity building for our allies and partners. And I think it's an exciting opportunity for us to continue to invest in.
All right, we're rapidly running out of time. I want to ask one final wrap-up question. You each get 1 minute. One of our questions came in asking, what is, so it's a two-part question. One is like, what is the biggest capability gap you see in the next 12, 24 months for a really testing scenario in the Indo-Pacific on the industrial base? And then the second is, how do you enable that with your workforce? Because there's, again, there were a lot of retirements last year, but there was efforts for the Warfighter Acquisition University, DSCU. So how do you see the workforce kind of helping address these challenges going forward? So let's start with, why don't we start with Admiral English, and then we'll go the Cadenazzi, Ruocco, and Miller.
First of all, I would say it is really a good time to be in this group and working on this problem. As a lifelong logistician, never thought that I would see this, and having the department focus as it has on this effort has been incredible. The one thing that I would say that we need to get after, particularly in a Pacific environment, is production at point of need. And we need to do that in conjunction with industry and include them in our planning and build better relationships just built on trust, not because I want to make sure that they understand that they are warfighters in this scenario as well. So I would just sum it up as production.
Mike?
So, Jerry, industrial-based policy, I think the biggest thing we're focused on at the workforce level is the industrial-based workforce, the skilled trades. We have 40-plus programs and a substantial commitment to them from Hawaii to Virginia, from the Gulf Coast to Michigan. where we're trying to go ahead and build the capacity, the excitement, the training for folks to actually work as welders, as pipe fitters, as electricians, machinists. It's incredibly important that we start setting the trajectory for the next generation. The folks that are going to build your submarines in 10 years are in middle school today. We need to get them thinking about this.
Great. Jim?
Yeah, I'm going to tackle the workforce thing head on. Like I said, that's the most important element in my mind, the foundational part. That could be on the industrial based side or government side. I'll talk about the government side for a second.
Interrupt these guys in mid-sentence.
Do I keep talking? Is that someone trying
Yeah,
to?
no, please. But yeah, let's go quick.
So look, we've been on a downward trajectory on the capacity and capability of our workforce over the last 30 years. I think the last year or so saw an acceleration of that in terms of people leaving, but we've got to build back that talent set. We have fallen into a compliance-based mindset, largely because those folks haven't had all the scar tissue, the sets and reps to know how to make risk-based decisions. The wartime footing puts us in those conditions forward. We have to have people operating like that. The bond program that Cadenazzi mentioned and others will help with the getting folks calibrated correctly, but we've got to get the right talent on board, and we got to pull out all stops to do that. The WarU effort, the rebranding of DAU into the WarU, that's going to be experiential training. That's going to be understanding exactly where everybody is on their journey from entry to journeyman to expert level and how they're being placed within our ecosystem to get after the needs that we have to deliver acquisition solutions to support the fight. So I'm expecting it's going to be an all hands effort to figure out how we shape that workforce. I'm already working that with the military departments and the WarU so that we are providing the right training and experience opportunities, industry rotations of the field will all be part of that.
All right, Mike.
Okay,
well,
thank you
30
very
seconds.
much. We have to
Okay.
close the panel session. So thank you all very much for participating in this year's acquisition research symposium. Very insightful, and I appreciate your support to the workforce.